That's like my I'm sorry, I just looked at the camera and I just like speechless. What? What did I miss? What'd you do in 2 seconds? Oh, that is insane, Julie.
Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today's tutorial is going to be over this beautiful, deeper complexion bridal makeup look. I'm so excited about how this turned out. The first step that I do before anything else is go in with the skin prep. I'm a person that does skin prep first just so it can thoroughly have time to sink into the skin and really do what it's supposed to do. I am going in with the Charlotte Tilbury Glow Toner on a Shiseido cotton pad for this particular client's skin. She told me that she was a little bit drier, and because of this is why I chose a more hydrating toner. The Charlotte Tilbury Glow Toner just gives the skin this really radiant sort of glow, has a lot of hyaluronic acid inside of it to be able to hydrate the skin, and I just overall really like it for normal to dry skin types. By going in with a toner or even a micellar water, this also ensures that there's no leftover makeup or any excess oils that are sitting on the skin before you go in with the rest of the skin prep. To further hydrate her skin, I'm going in with the Sonia Roselli Water Elixir. This is a very interesting kind of consistency. It almost looks like just a water if you pump it out in your hands. However, it is supposed to be a dual action moisturizer and also serum in one. It technically can also double as a primer as well because it leaves behind more of a sticky kind of residue once it dries down. So sometimes I do just leave it alone and then go in with face makeup on top. For this client's skin in particular, I could tell that she needed a moisturizer on top. I usually can tell this because when I go in with the cotton pad and a toner, I can tell if the skin feels rough and if the cotton pad is dragging a little bit more. And in that case, I can tell that the client's skin needs a little bit more hydration. On the opposite spectrum, if the cotton pad seems like it's just gliding right over, I'm going to assume that the person is more normal to oily skin typed. So for the Sonia Roselli Water Elixir, I personally do not like applying any makeup or anything with my hands if I can avoid it. It's just a lot more sanitary. I'm going to go in with a flat brush. I want to make sure I cover all the areas so I'm not skipping and the makeup lays on as smoothly as possible. With that same brush, I'm going in with a moisturizer. This is the Belief True Cream Aqua Bomb. It's more of a gel style moisturizer. It's infused with a lot of hyaluronic acid, and in turn, this is going to provide a lot of hydration, especially for those with more dry skin types. I absolutely love using gel moisturizers as opposed to any creams. I feel like the makeup lays really well on top of it as it's not super heavy. The thinner layers that you put on a client's skin, the better that your makeup is ultimately going to turn out. Since this client didn't have any physical dry patches on her face, I didn't go in with any sort of exfoliator, but if you do have a client that does physically have dry patches on their face, you want to make sure to lightly exfoliate those first. I would highly suggest going in with either an eye cream or some sort of cream-based moisturizer on a Q-tip and use circling motions to lightly exfoliate those areas. You can also go in with some sort of exfoliating pads as well, such as the Peach and Lily Lazy Day Moisture Pads or the First Aid Beauty Facial Radiance Pads. Once the skin prep is done, I'm going in with the eyebrows next. I'm taking the NYX Micro Brow Pencil in the shade Espresso. It's just a deep chocolate brown sort of color. I decided that an ombre style brow would look best on her. I wanted to keep it lighter in the front and then darker on the tail ends of the brow. I always get comments about this where people don't think that I do the brows dark enough or it's not defined enough, and I'm not really a person that likes doing super heavy or dark brows. It's just not my style. I'm more of a natural makeup artist to begin with, so anything that I do on people is going to be a little bit more natural. For the brows, whether it be a pencil or a powder, I pretty much use the same techniques. My whole goal when I do brows is to mimic the direction that the hairs are going to make it look a little bit more natural. In the front, I'm flicking up because that's the way the hairs grow. Then as I go near the back half or the tail end of the brows, I'm using more elongated strokes to mimic the way that those brow hairs are growing as well. I also do this very light-handed, and if I need to get any darker, I'll push a little bit harder. I just know that using a pencil is a little bit more pokey, I guess, than a powder or any sort of gel. So that's why I like to go a little bit more light-handed. So it's not like I'm stabbing the person in the face. For the darker part of the brow, I'm going in with a brow powder for this. I don't have to define this as much as I'm just trying to mainly go for darkness. So I went in with the Senna brow powder in the shade Noir, which is a very, very deep, rich brown. And I'm using that to define the outer half. I just want to shade in the color mostly and deepen it up, and then I just flick outwards to make that really thin tail. As you can tell, I'm using a very thin angled liner brush. I believe this came in a set from Morphe. I just love using angled brushes for brows a little bit more than anything else, just because I do like the control that it gives. Next, I'm going in with the eyes. I always want to make sure to put down some sort of eyeshadow primer, just so the eyeshadows have something to stick to and can last a lot longer. I personally love going in with a tinted eye primer or even a concealer. By having an eye base with a tint, it cancels out any discoloration on the eyelids, or if the person's a little bit lighter, sometimes the eyelids can be a little bit veiny and you can see those through the eyeshadow if you use a clear base. As you can see, I'm taking this eye base on a flat concealer brush. This is just one from Delium Tools that I found a really long time ago. I use this to go up underneath the brows and define the shape of it a little bit more. This also does end up concealing any stray hairs if somebody, for instance, hasn't plucked their brows beforehand, which has happened multiple different times. So this trick also does help with that as well. Besides just sculpting up underneath the brows, I'm just putting it all over the rest of the lid just to make sure everything is nice and primed for eyeshadow. Also, I do want to point out that I chose a lighter color than her skin tone, only because the way that I'm going to do eyeshadows, I need the eyeshadows to be very pigmented and pop on her skin tone. So I chose an eyeshadow primer that was probably around like 2 or 3 shades lighter than her skin tone. You'll understand once I start going, but I'm pretty much going to be doing a softer cut crease with really burnt oranges and rusty sort of colors. And with that in mind, I needed to make sure to have an eyeshadow primer that was a little bit lighter. Now, this is the secret to how you make creamy eyeshadow bases work without setting them with anything. I am not one to set eyeshadow bases or anything with a powder on top because I don't think the eyeshadows turn out as pigmented. So in this case, you need to make sure to somehow remove any excess product so it doesn't settle into the fine lines and the creases inside of the eyelids. I personally like to take a clean blending brush and do this, but you can also use a damp sponge as well. Now onto the eyeshadow. I wanted to go in with a really warm eyeshadow look because I felt like this complemented the undertone of her skin really well. She has more of an orangey red undertone, as you can tell, so I wanted to bring that tonality into the eyeshadows as well. So as a transitional color, I'm going in with the COZZETTE Infinite Matte Eyeshadow in the shade Empower. It's more of a burnt rustic orange kind of color, and it looks absolutely beautiful on her skin tone and complements it very well. If you guys have never tried COZZETTE eyeshadows before, they are a pro beauty brand that I get off of Camera Ready Cosmetics, which means that you can in turn get a pro artist discount if you qualify for it. They just have the most pigmented formulas, they're super blendable, and also have very minimal fallout, which I cannot wrap my head around. It's really mind-boggling, but they are definitely formulated for pros and just make it very easy to blend out. I wanted to talk about the eyeshadow placement really quickly. She did have a little bit of hooded eyes, which means that she did not have a lot of lid space between her actual eyelid and her brows. So since I wanted to do a more softer cut crease look on her, I wanted to make sure to blend up the eyeshadows high enough that you can still see the color even after I cut the crease. So I'm blending it up a little bit higher than I normally do, but not so close to the brow that you can't see that there is any sort of transitional shade. And I'm also blending a little bit farther into her inner corner as well. The rest of this look is going in with the Juvia's Place Warrior 2 eyeshadow palette. It's an all matte eyeshadow palette, and I absolutely love it, especially for deeper skin tones. I'm going in with the shade Jamada, which is a mid-tone burgundy sort of shade. It almost looks like it's red inside of the palette. I wanted to bring in a lot of warmth into this eyeshadow look, so I thought that using some sort of redder burgundy kind of shade would be perfect for it. I'm using a thinner pencil brush. This is from Jessup brushes, and I wanted to define the crease a little bit more and slowly just build up the intensity. Cut creases, especially on hooded eyes, are very tricky because you have to get your placement correct, otherwise it's not going to look right and you can't see all the colors. So if you're doing this technique, just make sure you're taking your time and using more defining brushes as opposed to the fluffy brushes. The only time I'm using the fluffy brushes is so I can blend out the edges and make them a little bit softer. Even though this isn't a super defined cut crease, I still wanted to make sure my placement's correct. I also wanted to point out really quickly that it's a lot handier if you work lightest to darkest. If you go a little bit too dark to begin with, it's really hard to blend it away and make it not so dark. So by working lightest to darkest, you can build up the intensity really slowly just to make sure that you're getting the right end result that you want. Now here's where the tricky part comes in. I'm using the Beauty Bay eye base in the shade 3. I wanted to make sure that this popped and was as bright as possible, so I went in with a shade that was quite a bit lighter. For this cut crease, I do want to warn you guys that I did end up doing a softer cut crease as opposed to a more defined one, just because I am not the best at cut creases. I'm not gonna lie, it's not one of my strongest skill sets because it's not asked of me that often. So I do not claim to be an expert at cut creases. I don't even claim to be that good at it. However, even though it is a softer one, I wanted to make sure that it was as precise as I could possibly make it, and I wanted to make it the right shape for her eyes. So that's what I'm mainly working on doing. This took me way too long, a little bit longer than I'd like to admit, but I wanted to make sure to take my time with this to make sure that it was symmetrical. Symmetry is the one thing that you really need to look for as opposed to anything else as far as cut creases go, because if it doesn't look even, you're going to make the whole entire eye look lopsided, and it does not look cute, believe me. At this point in time, I was still focused on trying to do more of a defined cut crease, so I ended up switching brushes to a lip brush that was a little bit more of the right shape that I wanted. I got to a point where I got super frustrated with trying to make it super defined and cut like I wanted it to be, and that's when I ended up just transitioning it into a softer cut crease instead. I'm again just not that skilled at it, guys, and I want to let you guys know where I feel like I messed up and how I also kind of corrected it and turned it into something else. Not everything's going to be perfect. Everybody always assumes that I get it right 100% of the time, and I really don't. Trying to work on my skill set and my artistry skills every single time I do a makeup application, but sometimes things just don't turn out good, and that's okay. Every once in a while, I like to have her open her eye as you saw me do, and this is to make sure that my symmetry is right and the placement's correct. At this point in time, I felt like I needed to blend it a little bit higher because I wanted it to be slightly above the crease of her eyelid. As I mentioned, she has hooded eyes, so having it above that crease is really essential. After I was somewhat happy with the shape, I went in with another COZZETTE Infinite Matte Eyeshadow in the shade Pagan. It's just an off-white creamy kind of color, I would say, and I took it with a flat shader kind of brush. Now, if you wanted to actually turn this into a defined cut crease, I would just use the same brush that you use to cut the crease, so it would be a little bit more of a defined edge. For me, I wasn't completely happy with the symmetry and also how uncrisp the lines were at the edge, so that's why I decided to just turn it into a softer cut crease instead. I overall like the way that it turned out though. I just feel like the defined cut crease too isn't exactly my style of makeup. Even though I'm not a pro at cut creases, I do want to give you a really quick tip because this is a time-saving tip. It is a lot more efficient if you completely finish the cut crease on one side before you start doing the other one. Otherwise, you're going to start obsessing over the symmetry on both of them and then start tweaking them back and forth. So I would completely finish one side first, and then that way you can just go in and mimic it on the other side. It saves a lot of time. As you can tell, I'm getting through the second eye a lot quicker just because I already have a defined shape on the other side. I also think the first eye took me the longest just because I was trying to do a defined cut crease and a little bit above my skill set at that point in time, and I got really overwhelmed. So if I hadn't spent so much time trying to be detailed on the first eye, I don't think it would have taken me as long. But still, doing that complete first eye is really helpful as opposed to trying to go back and forth to do both of them simultaneously. Once I had them matched up pretty well, I went ahead and set that one with the cream color powder as well from the COZZETTE shadow. I decided to keep this eyeshadow look completely matte. I didn't want to do any shimmer. I hardly do all matte eyeshadow looks, and I just wanted to challenge myself a little bit. Now I'm going in with the Juvia's Place Warrior 2 eyeshadow palette again with the shade KUFURU. I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm so sorry if the pronunciation's wrong. I'm taking a blending brush and just adding a little bit more depth on the outer corners. This is more of a deeper chocolatey brown color inside of that palette. After I did the lighter cut crease, I felt like it needed a little bit more definition. I mainly wanted to create more of a contrast with her eyeshadow look this time, so really dark in the crease and then lighter on the outside. I personally love this contrast, especially on really deep complexions. I feel like it looks absolutely stunning. Next, I'm going back in with that burnt orange shade called Jamada from the Juvia's Place Warrior 2 palette. I wanted to create a really soft ombre kind of look on her lid, so I'm using this to, again, bring out the tonality of her skin. I just love the warmth and all the oranginess in the skin tone, so I'm trying to bring that out in the eyeshadow look as well to make everything look cohesive. So I'm using this Jamada shade and just sandwiching it kind of right in between that KUFURU shade, which is the dark brown on the outer corner, and also with the COZZETTE shadow in Pagan, which is that cream color on the cut crease. If you decide to do an ombre gradient kind of effect like this, just keep in mind that you're going to have to go back and forth between the colors multiple different times, especially if they're matte, just to make sure that everything blends in with each other and make sure that all the colors show up equally. So yeah, it just took me a while to go back and forth, but besides that though, I feel like I did accomplish what I wanted to, which made me overall really happy about this. Now I'm going on to eyeliner. I'm using my favorite gel liner in the world. I'm going in with the INGLOT AMC gel liner in the color 77, which is just a matte black shade. I know that a lot of people have 50-50 thoughts about this liner, but to me, I've never had an issue with it. But I do highly recommend that if you do have an issue with it transferring, it's probably because the person opened their eyes a little bit too soon. It does need a few seconds to be able to dry, so make sure you have your clients keep their eyes completely closed. Sometimes if you are using it on the bottom lash line, I do highly suggest going in with a black eyeshadow afterwards and setting that lower lash line or anywhere near the inner tear duct. Okay, back onto the actual technique though. As you can see me doing, I'm just doing a line straight across at first. We will be doing a sharper wing liner on her. I just feel like I need to get that line straight across on both eyes before I start going in with the wing. Right here, I wanted to show you guys that I completely messed up and accidentally touched the eyeliner to the center of her eyelid. As you can tell right there. So instead of panicking about it, I wanted to show you guys how I fixed it. First, I let the eyeliner dry all the way and then started rubbing it away with my finger afterwards. This will kind of slowly peel up a little bit of it. After that, I went in with a concealer brush that had that eye base on it and went over the top. Then, of course, you need to reset it. So I went back in with that PAGEN eyeshadow shade from COZZETTE on my finger and then just tapped it right over top. And then as you can see, it is now corrected completely. Again, I want to be raw and real and honest with you guys, and just to let you know that I still mess up on things. I still don't do everything perfectly. There is no such thing as perfection. You can get close, but it may not be perfect. So now I'm going on to the winged eyeliner. The biggest tip that I have for you guys when you're doing wing eyeliner is have your client look straight ahead like I did with her. Draw a little mark of where you want the wing to sit and then start drawing in your wing. I usually like to do the flick first, so I'll take my brush with the longest part at the top and then start angling down. Once you have that angle right, you go ahead and start filling in the triangle shape on the outside. Every once in a while, you can have your clients open their eyes all the way just to make sure that you're mapping it out correctly. Don't try to draw in a winged liner without having your clients open and check for the placement first. This is how your winged eyeliner ends up being hidden by the hood of the eye or ends up not being placed correctly. On the other side, I already drew in the main part of the wing, but now you see me just filling in the outer edge of it just to create a thicker part on the outside and a sharper tail. I am seriously super obsessive about the sharpness of my wings, so if it isn't super sharp, I am not happy with it. Symmetry is also really important for wing liners as well, so sometimes you just kind of have to go back and forth between the two of them. Next, I'm going in with lashes. I'm going in with the Ardell Naked Lashes in the style 421. They are all one length. They're just a little bit longer of lashes. Still look very natural though. So as you can tell, I'm placing the inner corner right where her lashes start on the inner corner and measuring on the outside. You're only going to cut from the outside and never the inside. And I'm applying the Kiss lash glue to them and just waiting till they dry. I set them off to the side for a little bit and then just use this time to apply mascara and also foundation match. For mascara, I always use waterproof. I never use regular because I always have people that are going to really long events. I want to make sure that it holds up through blood, sweat, tears, etc. So I always use waterproof mascara. My absolute favorite is the L'Oreal Lash Paradise mascara. I usually do the Blackest Black. I'm just taking this on a smaller brow applicator. Brow applicators make a little bit more sense when applying it to shorter eyelashes because of the fact that they are a little bit smaller and more controlled than normal applicators. Also, a really quick trick for not getting the mascara on the eyelids is using your finger as a guard. As you saw me doing, I was putting my finger right above her lash line, so when you flick up with the mascara wand, it's not hitting her lids. Once the lash glue has partially dried, which means that it's partially white and partially clear, I go ahead and stick on the lashes. I personally like using a lash applicator instead of my hands because I feel like I can see where it's placed a little bit better. As you're seeing me doing, I instructed the client to look down, just not closing her eyes all the way. This will prevent the lashes from sticking to the bottom. Her eyes did start tearing up just a little bit, so I wanted to give her time to make sure that it wouldn't like run down her face or tear up or anything. Then, as you see me doing for the lash application, I'm sticking the lashes directly in the center first, making sure it sticks, and then adhering it to the outer and the inner corner. After that, I press it in a little bit with my fingers to make sure it's sticking fully. I had her open her eyes all the way to make sure they were sitting on there correctly. I did, however, notice that the lashes weren't completely sitting right on her lash line because she had a little bit more curly lashes naturally, which were in turn pushing up the false ones. So I made the executive decision to flip the lash applicator sideways and just mesh her false ones with her real ones. Next, I'm going back in with the eyeliner again, and I want to go over the lash band just to make sure to hide it a little bit more and also to make sure that the eyeliner shows up on top of it. As you see me doing, I'm making sure to press up with my thumb, and this will make the eyelids a little bit more taut. This is really great for people, especially who have maybe wrinkles in their eyelids or a little bit more texture, and it will make sure that the eyeliner doesn't skip. For the inner corners, my trick for doing this is making the clients look down, just not closing their eyes all the way, and that will make sure you can get access to the inner corners really easily. I had her open her eyes just so you guys could see, and also she could see what the lashes looked like. I absolutely loved this style on her. Next, I'm going in with a combination of foundations. I'm going in with the NARS Natural Radiant Longwear Foundation in the shade Zambi, and then also going in with the Face Atelier Foundation in the shade 12, and also mixing a little bit of the Heat Shade Adjuster, which is the red shade. As I'm looking back at this, I kind of wish I I would have mixed in a little bit more of the red shade just to be a little bit more warm on her skin tone. It wasn't really like ashy per se, but I do think that it made it a little bit more of a neutral tone than I wanted it to be. Again, I'm always still learning. I'm always still growing. I don't do a ton of deeper complexion people, but I felt like I didn't do that bad in the grand scheme of things. Again, I think it was just like a tad off. I don't think it was significant enough to be like, whoa, you don't want to go out in public like that. But again, I want to share with you guys all the tips and also the mistakes that I do too. I'm always learning. I'm always growing. It's always good to learn and adapt as an artist, and each mistake that you do is a learning experience. I'll probably call her back on my channel to do this again just to make sure I can get this 100% correct. As you can tell, it looks different in different lighting, so it was really freaking hard to tell if I was off or it was just the lighting. I'm not really sure. The other thing that I totally should have done is go in with a darker orange color corrector right near her chin area, because it was naturally a little bit darker and a little bit ashier than the rest of her skin tone, and I should have totally color corrected that out. Another mistake that I made, but again, learning. So moving on with the actual technique that I'm doing, I'm drawing it on with the same concealer brush that I use to apply the eyeshadow primer, and I like doing this technique just so I can control where the product is and also the coverage. Then I'm also blending it out with a damp sponge. I get these sponges from the Beauty 360 line or the One and Other line. I think they're interchangeable from CVS. They're just the jumbo cosmetic sponges. While we are blending to our heart's content on screen, because this will probably take a little bit, I want to go ahead and just tell you guys a little bit about the two foundations that I mentioned. So the NARS Natural Radiant Foundation is a silicone based foundation. It's a medium to full coverage foundation and a little bit more of a satin finish. Then the Face Atelier is also a silicone based foundation, which means that the two will blend together really nicely. That one is a satin finish foundation as well, and it is a more medium coverage, but you can build it up to full. Please be cautious if you are mixing foundations like this, as they all have to have the same base. If you check the ingredient list, the very first one on the list will be its base. There is oil, water, and also silicone base, and they all have to have the same base to be able to mix together, otherwise it will tend to separate. Next, I'm going in with the Too Faced Multi-Use Concealer in the shade Cocoa and Chestnut. I did end up blending the two together evenly, and that created the most perfect concealer shade for her. I'm going to go in right down the center of the face to highlight, and then up underneath the eyes. With deeper skin tones, you almost have to work in reverse. You have to lay down your base and then use the base almost as the contour, if that makes sense, instead of actually going in with a contour. I did end up going in with a deeper bronzer just because I kind of goofed and made the center of the face really light, and then I had to kind of backtrack. Again, everything's a learning experience. This was a model call for me, so this person did not pay for it because she knew that I was trying to get more deeper skin tones to diversify my portfolio and also practice on deeper complexions, because I know that I'm not 100% skilled at it. So I'm going right now around the center of her face because I wanted to try to color correct out the ashiness or the grayness that her skin naturally had. But again, I think going in with that red color corrector would have been more ideal than me trying to do this with a concealer, because in turn I did kind of lighten it a little bit more than I wanted it to be. A little fun fact about the Too Faced Born This Way concealer: it is more of a satin finish concealer, a little bit more hydrating, and it also is a medium to full coverage concealer as well. This is by far my ultimate favorite concealer, and is the only liquid concealer that I keep inside of my kit. I don't carry any other ones. It does really great on even mature skin, oily skin, dry skin, whatever type of skin and whatever age range that you are. It's just a flawless concealer. And then up underneath the eyes, I decided to go with a little bit of a darker shade, so I mixed in a little bit more of the cocoa shade, which was the one that was a little bit darker, because I didn't want it to be super bright underneath the eyes. I just wanted to more so just even out everything. With the under eye area, just be cautious of the fact that some people are very sensitive underneath their eyes, so the closer to the lash line that you get, the more cautious and more light-handed that you want to be. I usually just have my clients look directly up. If I sense that their eyes are watering, I just pull back for a little bit, but usually maybe about every 5 taps or so, I'll pull back a little bit, let the clients blink, so they're not forced to hold their eyes open the whole time. Next, I'm going in with the setting powder underneath the eyes and right down the face. I'm going in with a Juvia's Place I Am Magic setting powder in the shade Gobi. Now, I want to point out that this shade was absolutely perfect for the center of her face where I put down the concealer, but then I make a mistake later, and I'll definitely show you what it is and you'll be able to figure it out too. But for the under eye concealer, you want to make sure to tap out the excess product that is sitting inside of like wrinkles or fine lines or anything. Otherwise, you're just going to be setting all of the product inside of the creases, which makes it look a little bit more dry and also heavy looking. Now, when I'm doing this technique, I'm not letting the product bake. I'm not letting it sit there. I'm just tapping it out all the way. I'm going right down the center of the face. Since she is not more oily, I'm just going right down the center of the face. I just wanted to set in the areas that I know may rub off. off. And this is a pretty common technique that I like to employ with people who have normal to dry skin. I don't want to overly powder them just because it can look a little bit more drying that way. As of now, I was really happy with the way her complexion looked, but then I make a mistake a little bit later and I'm mentally slapping myself because I know I could have done better. Now, I didn't have a liquid contour that was deep enough for her complexion, so I went in with the NARS Natural Radiant Foundation in the shade Zambi, which was a little bit deeper than what her complexion is right now. It made a really, really great contour, by the way, so if you guys do have a person that is deeper of a complexion, I would highly suggest just using this foundation because it blends right into the skin, since that's the exact foundation that I use for her skin anyways. As you can see, it's making a very beautiful shade on her skin tone. Seriously, so happy at this point in time. I wish I would have just stopped there, but of course your girl had to keep messing with things, and that's what happened. I'm just using a really small eyeshadow brush and tapping it in the areas that I want it to be, and then I'm using that same sponge to blend it out. I'm going into her cheekbones and right around the perimeters of her face just to create more of that contoured kind of look. Then this next part you're going to see is where I severely messed up. I decided to use the Juvia's Place Gobi powder to bake underneath her contour just to define it and make it a little bit more prominent. However, I did not realize that the Juvia's Place powder was not supposed to be a baking powder like the Huda Beauty one. So I made the mistake of letting it sit there, and it definitely looks that color for the remainder of the application. There was one of three things I probably could have done about this. So number one, I probably could have skipped this step altogether. Then I also could have used a darker powder, I think, and it would have worked okay. And then number three, I could have just blended it in all the way instead of letting it sit there and bake. So yeah, those are the three solutions that I came up with afterwards, but ultimately I do regret doing this step. So what I'm doing right now is just solidifying the contour a little bit more. I wanted to deepen it up. I went in with the Morphe Bronze Show bronzer, which is a matte bronzer. It's in Cocoa Woe, and I decided to deepen up the cheekbones and go around the perimeters of the face and right down the nose as well. I also went up underneath the chin too, because at this point in time I kind of knew that it was a little bit lighter than I would like on the bottom half of her face, so I tried to correct this out as much as possible. Then for blush, I went in with the NARS Rising Star Cheek Palette, and this is the deeper burgundy shade inside of there in the shade Premier. It's such a pretty color. I believe this palette is limited edition. It came out with their holiday collection in 2022, and I don't know if it's going to be part of their permanent line now, but if it is discontinued, I would highly recommend for NARS to come out with this blush permanently because it's a really fantastic color. Then for the next several minutes after this, I discovered that the powder did not just brush away, and I had to go in with a sponge to physically try to blend it out, and I seriously could not get it to blend out. I kept going back and forth with the bronzer in the shade Cocoa Woe to try to blend it out a little bit, but there was just such a harsh line there. Guys, do not try to bake with the Juvia's Place powders. They are not meant to be baking powders. I'm used to using the Huda Beauty ones, and those are supposed to be baking powders, so they blend away really, really easily and do not stain the face the color that they are. I mean, you can see how much effort that I'm physically exerting to try to blend that out, and it took a really, really long time. I think it looked okay for what it was, but yeah, it could have looked a lot better if I hadn't done that. This is also why you do model calls, for reasons like this. In case you mess up or products don't work how you want it to, at least you're not doing it on paying clients. Alright, next I'm going in with highlighter. I'm going in with the Dior Backstage Highlighting Quad in the shade 001 Universal. This is a beautiful highlighting glow palette. I absolutely love it. It has such universal shades for all skin tones. So I ended up mixing the champagne shade and also the bronze shade inside of that palette, and that was what I used for the highlighter. I love mixing all the colors in the quad just to create that custom color for people. Since we were going for more of a warmer, sultry kind of look anyways, I think the bronze tones looked absolutely gorgeous on her. As you can tell, I'm placing the highlighter right on the top of her cheekbones, going on her temples, right down the bridge of the nose, on the cupid's bow, and also on the chin as well. And then we are finishing up underneath the eyes finally. I like to do this as the last step. The whole goal for me is to replicate the same shadow colors that I did on the top and the bottom, just to make sure that everything is nice and even. For the bottom lash line, I like to lay down my darker shadows first and then blend it out with the lighter ones. I'm going in with that darker brown shade inside of the palette that we used for the top in the shade Kufuru. I am personally not a fan of using eyeliners on the bottom lash line, as I feel like they transfer pretty easily. So instead of using actual eyeliners, I like using darker brown shadows in replace of them. It gives a softer look for me, and it just is a little bit more waterproof and transfer proof. So then after I'm done using the shade Kufuru, I use the shade Yoda inside, which is that warm terracotta color. color inside of the palette, and I'm using that to blend out the KUFURU shade. Next, I'm going in with the lower lash mascara. I'm taking the L'Oreal Lash Paradise Waterproof Mascara again with a brow spoolie. As I mentioned, brow spoolies are extremely helpful for those people who have a little bit shorter lashes and you don't want to use a full mascara applicator. Sometimes if they are too big of applicators, it can get a little bit messy. Of course, you always want to be sensitive around a person's eyes, especially if you're dealing with the lower lash line. Make sure you give your clients time to blink, and also pay attention if their eyes are going to water. You might want to give them a break. At this point, I decided to revisit the lighter skin issue at the bottom of her face. This is the KET Cosmetics powder foundation in the shade N11. It did match her skin tone perfectly. I honestly wish I either would have gone in with more of this, or I could have used my damp sponge and just pressed it in as opposed to just going over with a brush. I think most of us think of powder foundations as this really full coverage powder like the MAC Studio Fix foundations, and that is not the case with these. The KET Cosmetics ones are a little bit more lightweight. They're more so like a dusting kind of powder that you use on top of everything. Of course, you can make them fully opaque if you want to, but in my opinion, they are definitely a little bit more lighter coverage than the MAC Studio Fix powders. I also use the darker shades as bronzer sometimes on people with medium skin tones. I really do think that they perform really, really well, and they're very waterproof too. Now I'm using one of my favorite lip liners for deeper complexions. This is the Charlotte Tilbury Lip Cheat Lip Liner in the shade Pillow Talk Intense. It's really similar to MAC's Chestnut lip liner. It's just a gel lip liner instead of a pencil, which means that it glides on a lot more easy, and I just like the wearability of this one a little bit better too. It's a very rich, deep brown shade, more on the neutral / warm side, I would say. I wanted to create more of an ombre kind of look for her and pull in that really light lid. So what I did was go in with a deeper lip liner and then fade it into a lighter color in the center of her lips. For the technique, I went ahead and did a really thick outline on her lips, and then I'm shading toward the inside of her lips a little bit to make sure that the lighter color blends in really well. I have seen artists do a thicker line all the way in as opposed to doing this shading method, but I personally like this one as it gives a softer kind of look. For the lipstick, I'm going in with the Essence This Is Nude lipstick in the shade Loyal. It's a really light peach sort of tone, I would say. Very complimentary to anybody with a more warm or red undertone, and I absolutely love how this looked on her. It pretty much almost mimicked the inside color of her lips to begin with. I was again trying to pull in the lighter tone shade on her lids to her lipstick color, and I was honestly pretty happy with the way that this turned out. Ombre lips, in my opinion, are a little bit more tricky to accomplish because the blending has to be absolutely perfect, but a really great trick to make ombre lips look really stunning is going in with a lip gloss. I've recently fallen back in love with the NYX Butter Glosses, and this one is in the shade Fortune Cookie, which is a very similar light peach color to that Essence lipstick that I put on. I'm starting out with the majority of the color in the center of her lips and then working my way out. This creates such a stunning effect, and it's very complementary to deeper tones. I'm such a sucker for the contrasts with the darker lip liner and then the lighter tones on the inside on very deep complexions. It's just absolutely stunning to me. Once this is applied all the way, I instruct my client to go ahead and rub her lips together just to make sure that the lip liner and the lipstick is fully blended into one another. Once she did this, I realized that I lost some of the intensity from the lip liner, so I decided to go back in with the Charlotte Tilbury lip pencil and redefine the lips again. I made my line a little bit thicker than I did before because I wanted to bring back that depth and intensity. I really overall was happy with the way that the lips turned out. I think that's one of my favorite parts about this, to be totally honest. I feel like it looks super natural, complements her skin tone very well, and complemented the eyeshadow look really well. Last step is going in with setting spray. I went in with the Skindinavia Bridal Makeup Setting Spray just to lock everything into place. Then I went in with my Patrick Ta setting fan to make sure that the setting spray dried down really quickly. That is pretty much the overall look. This is her reaction at the very end. I absolutely love her reaction. She was so sweet.
Oh my god, this looks so good. I love the eyes the most. That's my favorite. And the lip. The lip is very good. And even the lashes, like, I'm so surprised how they, like, stayed on, too.
Obsessed.
Yes. Very good. Wow. You think there's, like, not much more to see? You just, like, discover something different. It's like, yeah, no, you coming up real nice, girlfriend. Yes, chiseled, baby. Butter.
Yes.
Yes, and I look hydrated, and I look young, and I look great, and I look...
Yes.
Wow, and the brows, wow. And the wing, too. Wow.
This is the completed look. Let me know how you think I did in the comments down below. Again, we are all learning. We are all growing. I think I pretty much critiqued everything I possibly could with this, but overall, I do think that it was a very nice look, and I'm overall pretty happy with the way that it turned out. This is also some pictures at the very end that she took, and I absolutely love them. Little reunion for us. So yeah, anyways, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!